Hi, Varun. How are you doing?
Hey Amit, doing good. How about you?
Yeah, all good. Actually, I've been trying to have a word with you for quite some time around all this thing going around data engineering. Uh, the data engineering summit is also nearby. It's around the corner, and I see there a lot of buzz around the whole data engineer persona or job role as well. So, I mean, I find it to be the most confusing job role around there. If somebody says, "Okay, I'm a data scientist," suddenly you know that okay, this guy must be doing writing maybe doing some algorithms and maybe doing some data cleaning. There's a very set, say, workflow there. And maybe if I say, okay, he's a data analyst, so suddenly SQL comes into mind, Excel comes into mind, say some visuals, this guy does some storytelling. But then there is this data engineer, which everybody talks about. Everybody says that I've been doing data engineering. I also looked at your profile in terms of what you have been doing in your career. You evolved also you started as a data warehouse engineer,
Yeah.
and then you evolved into data engineering paths, and today you are leading the engineering unit at Mathco. So a very your journey was very say aligned to a data engineer, but I saw a lot of different things around different domains, different skill sets. There was nothing like very few skill sets which were going above towards, like, I think you must be a decade or more old in the industry. So, can you give me your understanding or with your experience, who's a data engineer and what does this guy do at workplace?
No, absolutely. I think that's a very good point. Because even when I look at my journey overall of the last 13 years that I've been in this industry, like you rightly mentioned, I started as a warehouse engineer or an ETL engineer that we used to call it back then. So just to give a brief snapshot, and I'll come back to your original point of what a data engineer is, right? So, so right now, like you said, I'm heading the engineering unit for Mathco. I started my career with TCS. Strangely, I got trained under the ILP program that we have. Right, I was trained under mainframes, but
Oh,
never
wow.
worked on mainframes. Right? Yeah, it was like a 3 months gig. I hated mainframes like anything, but still had to stick around with that. Then I started looking after. I mean, I was then pushed into ETL engineering, and back then I think it was not a very well defined. Well, it was well defined, but it was not a well known job back then, right? I mean,
Hmm.
because it was dominated mostly by software engineers, where their focus was okay. If you know Java, if you know C, if you know C++,
Yeah,
then you are the cool, person in the company and the team.
yeah.
This ETL engineer was more of a very, you have to take a back seat and like, okay, you're working on data and that's your
It was more
space.
of a support role. But I have also
Yeah,
worked in this kind of, okay, there is some data that needs to be moved. Is
yeah.
need to be for what? Maybe we want to build some reports.
Correct. It was all about those descriptive reports, those organizational basic descriptive analytics rather that you used to do. There's no predictive analytics per se all the time, right? Even the dashboards back then was like, okay, you have a dashboarding tool. It has a feature that allows you to forecast.
Yeah,
That's all we knew.
yeah.
And even with data, right, our understanding, or at least my understanding back then was okay, I'm an ETL engineer. I just extract, transform, and load the data. I didn't care about what happens beyond that. I mean,
Hmm.
to be very honest, maybe it was a naivety of me back then, or maybe that is how the industry was back then, where consumption side focus was not as high as it is now. Like when
Hmm.
I say consumption side, like it is all driven by business value, how the top line and bottom line is getting impacted, and what matrix you are impacting as an engineer or a data engineer per se. Back then
I
that was
was
not the case.
I was reading a very interesting post yesterday by a founder of a data, a pretty good company, that there's a very interesting trend happening in the industry where the data analytics engineering is moving from a cost center to being more on revenue center, where it is being seen as that it is directly generating revenue rather than being a support, which like me and you we have faced back then.
Correct.
So how do you see that thing evolving?
Yeah, I can take a simple example. Let's take an example of a marketing division within an organization, right? So I've worked with marketing division a lot. Even like I was in a close stint with a real estate company where I quite literally set up the marketing data engineering practice for them. Of course, I had helping hands, but I was very closely involved. So for any, let's take a B2C company, right? Everything is driven by how much insights you can generate from a customer data. Now if you are building any data pipeline or any insights generation out of customer data, then of course your entire analytics is focused on that metric, right? Like let's take an example of, I want to increase the number of customers that come to my website, right? So that, let's say that's one of the metric that I'm tracking. So for that metric tracking, I have to make sure that all the data that I'm capturing for the customer and the customer's journey around my website, how it is interacting, everything is captured, positioned, and presented to the marketing team, so that they can eventually take better decisions and increase their traffic also by making
Yeah.
sure that the campaigns are better. So when you increase the traffic of the customer to your website, then the likelihood, again depending on how much conversion rate you have, the likelihood of more input you have, the better your chances of converting a customer, right? So you are impacting in a way the top line of the company, right?
True.
Where the data pipeline that you have built for customer, now again in customer you can think of a flavor of Amit can be represented in five different ways for a customer. If Amit is represented in five different ways for a B2C company, how do I make sure that this is the same Amit that I'm talking to?
Hmm.
That means the way I do the identity resolution around Amit, how do I resolve Amit as a single customer rather than five different customer, is very critical. And that's where
Right.
data engineers come into play. They
Right.
build those identity resolution systems so that Amit becomes single entity rather than five entities. That means when I'm campaigning, my campaigns are much better, my targeting is much better essentially. That means my conversion probability increases, right? So
Right.
that's where you are impacting the the top line
Very
in a
much.
much more impactful way. And that's where I absolutely agree that while earlier why it was not happening is potentially because the amount of data usage and decisions made around the data was not high. That is why it
Correct.
was looked at as support function. So I'll
Correct.
take an example of let's take an example. I worked with an investment banking customer, right? I spent like 3.5 4 years with them, where we
Right.
were migrating their entire legacy system out of Oracle, and also we were making them compliant for GDPR regulations around the anti money laundering, the
Hmm.
FATCAs of the world, etc. Right? Now you can't have a measurable impact around that back then. It was just around, okay, you're migrating, you're doing everything right. But if you quantify that around how much money they are losing because of not being compliant, or how much they will lose,
Right.
then you are essentially impacting their bottom line as well, right? But I mean, coming from that background of solely developer or support team,
Yeah.
we were never looked at, or at least we never thought that we can impact a business. But now, I mean, it's especially like in last 4 5 years at least, and given my journey also into quote unquote analytics industry, has been very razor focused on analytics industry in last 5 years. And at least within our company, at least we talk about a lot about the how do we impact customer eventually, right?
Right.
That's what I can say. And that has been the kind of philosophy even I work towards, that anything that you're looking forward to, make sure that how much value you're generating for the customer, and
True.
not being looked at only as a support function. But yeah,
True.
that's my true take on how I have seen this evolve and take it
Hmm.
forward, and want to take it forward as well in the future.
So that's interesting because I think anyone amongst us would take pride in being an engineer coming out of engineering, say colleges, and being in that having that energy that okay, now I want to change the world. I would code and do everything. But as you see today, what's happening is code is commoditized entirely, right? So no longer say you're getting paid for being coding a lot, or like, or say being, but you are still accountable for the outcome which is coming.
Yeah.
So one thing what I've seen, and you would also be seeing, is this news going around: SaaS is dead, right? Software as a service was, which has been the flagship way of say serving customers. And India, we have seen a boom of SaaS. Like we are part of an accelerator where all have been SaaS companies, but suddenly there's like a with AI coming, and they're saying like it's not per seat based pricing. The pricing has changed from per outcome based, per
Yeah.
task being done. So
Mm.
in the end, for everybody, even for a person who is working in a project, it's all about what's the outcome you're being generating, how quickly you're generating, and how accurately you're generating, right? So yeah, so
No,
yeah, go ahead, sorry.
no, no. Yeah, no, I just want to add one more point there, and coming back to your original question, that data engineer role in my mind, I always break it down into three aspects. And I think I have also related with those three aspects. One is, of course, the technology, where you're building the out and out backend systems, the pipelines, whatnot, right? Second is the process. How are you making sure that whatever you have built organizationally, it is accepted, it is evangelized, it is running in a most robust manner, right? So on top of technology, there is also process, and on top of that, which is very critical, and I think a lot of the industry practitioners are also following, is how do you mix domain into this mix, right? Because understanding the context about your customer, like I spoke about this B2C customer, where you understand the customer data of that B2C uh, is very critical. Understanding the business is very critical. It is not just from the
Mm,
standpoint of whether you can build a quality data pipeline or not. It
mm,
is also about what value generation you are
true.
doing. Because having that legacy knowledge of any industry or any customer per se is always, a great value at least, especially in this era,
Mm,
where, like you said, code is getting commoditized, and it's very easy to, I mean, to be very honest, if you do a round in your company or in any organization, you will see a chat gpt or any other these sites being opened, like, and it will be Anthropic or any Claude, etc., right?
right.
And people are always taking help of, okay, how can I write a SQL code, how can I write a Python
Yeah.
code? So that is not a differentiator, at least in analytics industry anymore. The
Mm,
differentiator is always how you can make sure that what you have developed is evangelized, is adopted, and
true.
also how much context you can bring into the system. Even with AI agents that we are developing, contextualizing everything is critical.
True. True.
Just developing that metadata layer and saying that you have enabled data governance and you have all those fancy, metadata around your system is not enough. How much you can contextualize more and, augment your AI agents with more and more data, with more and more context rather, of your business, is super critical. And that's where I feel data engineers need to start focusing a lot. And I feel my focus has at least shifted a lot in last 3 to 4 years, like I've been saying, in this area, because up until then it was always focused on, okay, I know tech, I'm good with tech,
Yeah.
I'll focus on that, I'll build the best systems possible, I don't care what is happening in the
Yeah.
consumption side. But now it cannot be that way. At least that is my strong perspective on how the role is evolving.
So, but one question it would be that I think you have spent at least that amount of time and have lived that journey and have lived that grind. So we are able to say that, okay, yeah, for us the domain understanding is important. But you know why domain is coming up so frequently now is because of AI. So with AI, all that knowledge of your industry, of your company, is something. It's like you have to just organize your knowledge in such a way so that AI can act upon it, and it
Yeah.
can then all the systems which are being built, right? So where is that knowledge? The knowledge, knowledge was with people. So people were the one who had that tribal knowledge in their heads about their business processes, about their how the company works. But now that knowledge, as more and more things get documented, it starts getting part of the system. So your AI is kind of starts working with you and
Mm.
starts replicating your workflow. And one more thing which I read recently was that one problem with where Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 companies have always dealt with is the oversassification. It's like at a point of time, HR head is dealing with 50 SaaS applications for different means. Marketing head is dealing with 25 SaaS applications, and everybody is saying, "I'm going to change your business. I'm going to save something. I want to increase something 2x." So now it was for people to getting trained and retrained in every other tool, and it was just getting death by tools. And with AI coming in, all people are saying that let everything be in the backside. All I need is a chat interface
Correct.
where
Yeah,
I can come in through Teams, or I can get integrated through anyone, and all I am looking for is a simple interface where people can talk to their technology, talk to their domain.
correct. No, I think, yeah, I think that absolutely is a journey forward, because I think we can't be sitting on the sideline and saying that it is not perfect system yet. It is absolutely not a perfect system. It will evolve. But I think on that point which you mentioned, that because of AI the things have been simplified. But I feel even before that, like if we look at the journey of the entire big data itself, I remember distinctively. I think it was in the year 2015 when big data, blew up. 14, 15 around, right?
Yeah, yeah,
We was sitting in this huge room in our office. I think there were 150 people, and people were getting trained on big data, and we just didn't understand anything about Hadoop back then. I mean, even when the trainers were teaching, we were like, what is this map reduce? How can such a complex system be built? How can we adopt? Do we have to learn Java? As a data engineer, I was confused. I never worked on Java. Do I have to completely transition off? To now, everything is SQL. Like
yeah,
with Spark coming in and a bunch of other frameworks as well, everything is so simplified that you just don't have to worry about anything, right? Even with systems like, I mean, the tools like DuckDB, for example, right? It's so simple to do any kind of processing and insight generation, transformation. It's all through SQL driven.
yeah.
So I think with AI, I think also what has happened is people have so simplified so much their entire journey of data engineer, that there is no differentiator, again, like I'm saying, in
Hmm,
just writing a SQL code or creating a pipeline.
true.
What is the process you are following? Like, I'll take a very simple example again. The reason I'm saying process again and again is because of AI. What has happened is a lot of focus has again gone back to data governance, quality
Very
specifically,
much.
right? Now, in a smaller organization with lesser complexity, lesser business units, it is very easier to fix the data governance problem. I mean, relatively
Yeah.
speaking, I don't want to misquote on that, right? So, but in a larger organization, which is a global company where there are so many heads, so many business units, how do you fix a data governance problem where there are disparate data sources, data owners are not defined? Even if data owners are defined, what they will exactly do being an owner? Let's say if an issue comes up, let's say I'm pulling the data from YouTube. I don't know who is the owner for data YouTube.
Yeah.
It's a third party. Who is coordinating with that third party? If it is a Whether it is a regional specific owner, whether it is a global owner, how do I define that process so that I can reach out to the right person?
Hmm,
Everyone is focused more on, I will build a discoverability tool. I will say that this is the data owner, and sure, data owner will do some magic around it.
hmm,
But what is the process that data owner will follow to resolve that issue? No, I mean,
hmm.
not a lot of conversation happens in that area, even in larger forums, right? So that's where I feel, especially in the data governance area, leaving other aside for now, process is super critical. And I feel data engineers need to understand that, define that. Maybe it will come with maturity. It cannot be done like, we can't ask a 1 or 2 year experienced person to take that. But that's the responsibility of, I would recommend, like a 5+ years experience, just to give some reference of how they can also look at, right, how they can add value through the processes also, and not just focus on, hey, I will just build data pipeline. I will, to be very honest, last 2 to 3 years I have not, I just don't want to build pipelines anymore, because
Right,
that I
right.
feel is not the next journey for a senior professional. Journey is always towards processes, then again marrying it with domain, the data understanding or the business context. And there is so much, like you mentioned again, tech, business, domain, and process is one. Within the data engineering landscape, to build end-to-end pipeline, you can build data pipelines, you can do governance, you can do security, you can set up, you can do cloud monitoring, you can do DevOps. I feel data engineers do all of this. Although roles are defined, but they do all of this. I
I
have
think,
I've done BI reporting also, to be very
yeah,
honest. So I know that they can do everything as
yeah.
long as they have the right intent. But yeah, sorry, you were saying something.
Now, I mean, same thing. I was kind of saying that data engineers appear to be the younger brothers of software engineers
Yeah,
who evolved earlier. It's evolving the same way.
yeah,
As like software engineers were evolving, and software engineers had to look into architecture, had to look into observability, had to look into scalability, reliability, a lot of things. Data engineers are doing the same thing, but they are the ones responsible because once data started becoming important and strategically important, helping organizations getting that competitive advantage. Like why somebody says that Amazon is a super efficient company, and Amazon, being a $1 trillion company, is able to deliver your orders without any delay, right?
yeah,
And millions of orders every day going around. Why? It's how does it is it happening? They built their systems, and their technology has been built around that. And it's not just their tech as the Amazon application, but that the data which is feeding that entire system. And
hmm,
as data became strategically important, I mean, protecting that data, building processes around data, building compliances around data, security, privacy, I think everything started becoming important.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
so
No,
if I have to just dig in that, since you talked about so many roles of a data engineer, um, you're building designing data platforms, right?
mhm,
At Mathman, I hear a lot when data engineers at the senior level, there's this thing around data platforms. Everybody's building data platform, but for a vertical. So whether it is a retail CPG, so what does this data platform do? I know software applications. I can imagine a software application. But when you say data platforms, what's there in front end? What's there in back end? If you could give a insight about what happens in a
yeah,
data platform, who does what?
absolutely. So I think overall, if you look at data platform, like it's an Uber term that we use to define anything that powers your entire data in the backend, right? So like all the technology that comes together to make sure that the data is available for the end consumption.
Right.
And even in the end consumption, I would include that as well as part of the data platform. Like, let's take an example of, on the consumption side, once you have delivered the data for the final, analytics to be built on top of it, whether it is descriptive or prescriptive, or taking further and advanced analytics on AI, you also have to build a lot of ML AI ops
Hmm.
operation systems, right? So
Hmm.
like ML ops that we have heard, AI ops that we are hearing, or X ops that we call it all the time, right? That also I will consider it part of data platform. So in
Hmm.
my mind, data platform is that backbone system that
Hmm.
allows you to move the data from point A till the point, the entire analytics, or decision making happens at a senior level, right? So everything in the backend is the data platform.
So
Now,
if I keep ETL, just to cut you, ETL is what we started with, right? Being an ETL engineer. So if I
yes,
consider, say, I am being able to do an ETL as the baseline,
yeah.
what else is needed to build that data platform which
Yes.
you talk about?
So apart from ETL, you would also need to build. First of all, you need to first architect the entire
Hmm.
end-to-end system, right? Right. If I have to simplify it, let's say for a very very smaller organization which are just getting started and they want to start generating some insights from the data.
Hmm.
Apart from ETL, what they need to make sure is, of course, that the data is moving securely, is stored securely.
Hmm.
How do you make sure that the storage or the technologies that you're using to
Hmm.
store the data or to compute or to observe the data, everything is cost effective?
Hmm.
So one dimension is, of course, moving the data from point A to point B. The other dimension is moving it in a secured way or storing
Hmm.
it in a secured way. Third dimension is cost effectiveness of that storage or that movement or that entire system. uh, that is very critical, right? So these are like two three dimensions around which you have to think about a data platform. Then you can again break it down into your regional variations, you can break it down into your unit business unit variations, you can break it down into your business function variations. So you have to consider a top level organization having multiple business functions, having multiple business units, then having regional dependencies, regional segregations. All of that you have to encapsulate in your data platform. Take an example. You have a US and a Europe region. You have data from 10 different sources.
Hmm.
How do you arrange your data in your storage? Like we are talking about a lot of object storage these days, right? Which has become
Right.
like the de facto data lake or lake house infrastructure, right? How do you define the topology of the entire data, right? Like first will you store it as a data source, then
Right.
business unit, then a region, then date, month, year, or you will have a different variation of it, right?
Hmm.
Designing all of those system topologies is also another variant that you have to look at within the data platform, right?
Right.
So that's one dimension. Also on top of it, right, if I have to increase the complexity of furthermore, like we used to talk about data marts earlier, right? So you have data marts segregated. Now there's a lot of talk about data product as well, right? So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
a data product. So take an example of, you have a customer, you have a product, right, which every company has. uh, so to build a customer 360, to build a product 360, consider these two become your data product, where
Hmm.
these are sole entities where you can map the journey of them end to end. Of course they will have their overlaps, but that again becomes your data product, these two. Also, any discoverability tool, let's say, that you build to basically say that, hey, this is my discoverability or marketplace, where you can come query and say that what kind of data do I have in customer, what dimensions do I cover, what depth do I cover, what quality do I have. All of that is also part of your data product, right? So data product is not just anything that just gives data, but also observability on the data is also a data product, in my opinion, right? And I think it is widely accepted in the industry as well. So data platform encapsulates everything. So just to summarize, the architecture of the entire system to move the data and to make decision, designing details of how the data will be stored, how data will be secured, how cost will happen, and also taking into nitty-gritties of your complexity of your systems, how you will make sure that data is arranged so that consumption becomes easier. Everything comes, in my mind, in the data platform. And I think a lot of the data architects or solution architects who are matured as a from the data engineering space focus a lot on these areas. So like when I talk or work with a lot of data architects also of late, there's a lot of focus on resolving the complexity of an organization and how the data will be stored itself, right? Or how the data will be presented. That has become a, like you say, right? For data scientists, majority of the work goes into cleaning of the data. So for a data engineer or a senior data or a architect per se, lot of their complexities around how do they make sure that the data is stored in a way that it is presented in the most optimal way for the
Hmm.
organization. And that
Hmm.
this is a vicious cycle, to be very honest,
True.
because there's no way you can come to a common consensus, because everyone has their own biases towards how they want to store or be the owner of that data,
True.
right? So data platform is a very, that's why I started with, it's a very uber term which
Yeah.
encapsulates everything.
True.
Also, in my opinion, just to complete this point, the entire ML engineering space or ML ops space, at least in organizations where there are no boundaries defined, is also a role where data architects, or we call it ML architects, sure, but eventually they understand the systems of data better, they understand the systems of ML better, they can design that in the best possible way, right? So that also becomes a part of your data platform to, to holistically complete it end to end. And now with AI, let's say, how you will, decide on what vector database you have to keep, what GPU instances,
Right.
how do you make sure that data does not leave your secured premises. So I mean, I can go on and on and on what data platform
True.
encapsulates, right? Because
True.
there's so much to do in this space, that I think data engineers, like, I'll be very honest, when I started my career, I was always scared how will my career evolve, because
Yeah.
ETL, like, never heard of. I mean, it was like, okay, it's a side job, you guys are doing something well and good. but now it has become so mainstream, or maybe it is a bias of my community that I work around, that I feel it is so mainstream that I feel this is like so much to do in this space.
True. It's
Yeah.
difficult to hold, and every day. I mean, then there's data mesh coming in. Then there is data. The moment you are trying to figure out, okay, there's something new. There's two more things coming in, and like AI kind of accentuating it and making it like, okay, how do I even walk? All right, Varun, I think the more we discuss about data platforms, I think the more we can unlayer. It's like an onion, you can keep unlayering it, and you discover that there is a lot more. So this brings to my next question that I don't think it should be possible for a single person to do all this, although there are
Yes.
these so many different moving gears. So then it becomes important to build a team around this, right? So if you
Yeah.
have to build a platform, you need to build a team. These people will have roles. These people will have skills which are complementary, the skills which are kind of overlapping. They will have some technical skills. There's some acumen you may need. So I'm very much interested to understand how would you build a data team if you want to build a data platform from scratch, right? Who will be these people? What job roles, seniority? If you could give me some idea around this, I think it would be an interesting thing to know. How do you build a data platform with people?
No, absolutely. I think to that question, right, I think there are multiple personas also that you can target through a data team. I'll start with that, right? Within an organization, when you're building a data platform, and eventually the team around it, then there is a role of a technical person who will actually make sure that the system is designed, built the right way. Then there are roles that will make sure that your systems and your designs that are built in a robust way is evangelized in the right manner as well, right? Whether internally or externally, that becomes very critical. Now, why evangelization is critical is because of the adoption. You have built a platform, you have built a system, but if you don't quote unquote market it well within your organization, there is no adoption that's going to happen, right? So there is another facet of that where evangelization become critical, right? So barring the overall project management, etc., which I think is common across any IT teams that you build in general, for a data team, the key roles in my mind from a technical standpoint, of course, is you would need, again, depending on the scale, you would need multiple of such roles,
Yeah,
but you would definitely need a data architect who will basically, whose role is to come. So before, in fact, before even data architect, right, you have to first understand from the lens of what you're planning to achieve, right?
yeah.
Like what this platform will entail. Will
Hmm.
that platform be, for a particular division to and scale across multiple division? Will it be for a region, scale across multiple region, or is it just for a specific use case that you are building, right? Once you do that requirement gathering, so one role will be to basically understand the requirement of what the platform is, right? So that
Hmm.
becomes very critical, because unless you understand what that is, that will convert into that outcome, it will never gonna convert into a vision that that the leader has set for your organization.
At this stage, you
Once
would
you have
need At this stage, you would need domain experts also to work with the
Yes,
data
yeah,
person, right?
absolutely, absolutely. Because domain experts will understand how you can drive value out of that
Yeah.
data, how you can even present that data, and how you can in fact arrange that data, right? So, like I talked about certain data products that you have to build.
Mm.
Now, whether your customer and product will sit under one umbrella, under different umbrella, how would you decide? Whether you will create a mart, whether you create a warehouse completely, how will you decide? So someone has to understand the complexity of the business, translate it into some sort of a technical nuance, so that your data architect can take it forward, right? So that is super critical. I think if you miss that bus, so to say, I think then your design completely
Yeah.
takes a backseat, right? So let's assume all the requirements are gathered and you understand that, okay, this is how I want to, what this is my vision, this is how I want to translate it into, and these are my outcomes that I want to deliver out of the data product, a data platform rather. Then definitely a data architect needs to be involved. They can be involved at an earlier stage also, but they will come and design and build the entire system, right? So
Mm.
design the entire system rather. So talking about what technology you will choose, what kind of cloud platforms, etc., you will choose within cloud platform, what are those services you can start with? Because
Hmm.
look, there's no right choice that you can make when you're starting this journey.
Hmm.
So that's where an experienced personnel is very critical, who has built such systems in the past, or
Hmm.
at least has seen a lot of such systems. Because
Hmm.
otherwise, what happens is you become very one-dimensional. Like take an example of a person who has just worked on Databricks all his life, or Snowflake all his life,
Yeah.
or Oracle all his life, or her life rather. Then their thinking will be very one-dimensional in certain respect, right?
True.
When I say these tools, I don't particularly mean just these tools, but uh, just the dimensionality of your thinking will
Hmm.
be scope box into certain things, right? That's where a person who has seen a lot of such systems, even if not designed a lot, but seen a lot of these systems, they will understand the nuances that will come across choosing these platforms, right? So that data architect role becomes very critical. Apart from that, of course, data engineers, like we have been talking, is very critical for all the needs. And here I would break it down into multiple uh, uh, experience level also,
Hmm.
because you need enthusiastic folks who are just starting off the career, because they can just do certain things, they can think about certain things which certain experienced folks become very skewed towards, and they don't think a lot. That's why you need a mix of junior, senior, mid level engineers also in the team, right? So what a lot of organizations do a mistake, at least in my experience of few years, have been they overload with a lot of senior personnels. They don't focus a lot on mid level or junior personnels. So that healthy mix is very critical, because the thinking is driven, the ability to ask a lot of these questions are driven through those mindset, right? So that's one aspect. Just allow me a minute. uh,
And
just give me a
technology
minute.
wise,
So that aspect becomes very critical.
and if I add, try to bring in
Yeah, go ahead,
a
please.
bit more depth of technology, the tech stack, right? What gets built up. So, other than the foundational technology, so I would definitely put SQL at the very top. If I start from the bottom, so if I start from the bottom, we'll put the SQL, because first thing is for you to know the data, discover the data, and to be able to give very quick value where you can start getting some outcomes, whether it is small reports or something out. Then Python, but then quickly evolving to Spark, where I think PySpark is starting to get more de facto for a data engineer rather than being more Python oriented. Python is there, but as you start working on these different platforms, so PySpark becomes
Yeah,
important. What else you would keep on adding as you grow, as the say the seniority grows up?
yeah, absolutely. So I think what needs to be added is one, definitely I'll start from the consumption as to how you are allowing people to extract the data. So like, what
Hmm.
warehousing technologies are you using, or lakehouse
Hmm.
technologies are you using, right? Again, I think in my experience, a mistake I have also done in the past, I've thought that it's a one short solution where just have a warehouse system, give it to all the teams, go with it, and then try to keep optimizing that system again and again and again, because we have been taught about data redundancy being a problem, and make sure that the data is not duplicated, which of course is valid. But at the same time, what we also have to understand is, how do we simplify the consumption, how do we make it in a cost effective manner, is very critical. That's where on the consumption side, I would say that people cannot restrict themselves to just one technology. It has to be a combination. It can be, let's take an example from an Azure stack, right? It can be you need a NoSQL database, like or a multi models database like a Cosmos DB, right?
Yeah.
Because you can then serve multitude of use cases. Then underneath you can power it by a Databricks or a Snowflake, depending on how you want to use your tables, like an external, internal,
Yeah.
what combination you want to use. You can in fact use transactional systems for your low latency systems as well, extracts as well, right? Or inserts as well, right? Because that also becomes very critical eventually. A new pattern that is getting coming into the system mix also is how people can start using, like I mentioned DuckDB for example as a reference last time, right? How you can start using that in the consumption side to reduce your cost further down, right? Because they allow you to extract the data in a very different manner, and similar technologies like DuckDB, right? So from the consumption side, that is very critical. On top of that, I think what kind of logs tools that you're using, right, to monitor your systems as well, right? Monitoring observability of the pipelines is always still a problem. I remember working for a real estate company where they had internally beautifully built their entire observability system, right, where you have a front end application where you can literally just go and see all your airflow. So we were using back then airflow,
Hmm.
to power all our data engineering pipelines. You can literally see for a particular data asset. Data asset is a table, let's say, for example, who is the owner, when was the airflow pipeline run, how much did it fail, when did it fail, what was the history, what kind of anomaly I can see in that data. That became very critical. So building that kind of a system, there is no out of the box,
Hmm.
out of the self tool yet. and
Yeah.
and I don't know if that can be built also because of so much nuances of that consumption side or observability side, because of so much tools that are there in the market. So this company built it beautifully, and I think I learned a lot in terms of how observability needs to be put in place and how much value
Hmm.
that drove for the company, right? So in
Hmm.
my opinion, in that tech stack becomes very critical. So in my mind, on the consumption side, the observability and the entire how will you project your data to the downstream teams becomes very critical, because in downstream you have personas,
Right.
you have core dashboard tools, you have AI agents. Now you also have your of course ML teams. They have different demands,
Right.
uh, demands. Even within ML teams they have different demands,
True.
right? How do you understand that? I feel as a data architect, a lot of the focus has shifted towards the consumption side, whether it is how do you arrange the data, or how do you project the data, what kind of tools you use to project the data, and what observability layer you put. And building of the pipeline, once you have defined frameworks within your organization, whether it is metadata driven or XYZ driven, then it is just a value add on top of it,
Right.
right? So
Right.
lot of the architects should not focus, or do not focus rather, a lot on building pipelines every day in day out. They define the framework, they move on, they focus more on the consumption, and then there is where the journey keeps going on and on and on, because that's where the complexity is, because ultimately you have to consume your data, right? So
True.
bronze, silver, and gold, once you have put into bronze and silver, no one consumes, so no one cares beyond a
Right.
point,
Right.
right?
And as the project evolves, so suppose you have built a data platform, and your technologies will be simple, your needs will be simple. Maybe the very first could be that, okay, let's bring the data at a single place, and then you think about, maybe you start thinking about, okay, let's build a warehouse, a single source of truth, right? So although sounds simple that you want to bring everything at a single place, but you look at the different kind of sources, the different cadence at which you get the data, the different, even by the name. So the word sales or the word amount, right, could be interpreted differently by a finance person, by an compliance person, by an employee, right? So I think there is a lot of fabric to be woven around in terms of your cataloging, in terms of quality pipelines. Can you also touch upon some of these, which you can start simple, great, but as you grow, as your usage increases, as your like lot of data swamps get created, so how do you work around that, and what are the kind of skills would be needed to keep the system running?
Yeah. So that's a very good point. To keep the system running, what are the skills needed, right? So in my mind, one critical, I think which has become now kind of a de facto, is also is quality analyst or data quality as a role itself, right? Now in that also there are two variants to it. One that just works on technology and enables that technology, and the other who understands the data to interpret quality better, right? That's where your domain contextualization, understanding the data rather, becomes very critical, right? So in my mind, to run system effectively, again, processes around your data is critical, and on top of that, if it has to be a human in the loop, then the person who understands the data really well, keeps evolving the quality metrics, is very critical, because there is drift that will happen in the data all the time as your business evolves, as your
Yes.
business reaches a scale
Yes.
and keeps evolving to new geographies, new patterns of data. the drift keeps happening. So how do you build those systems? Very critical there. I feel combination of role is important. One is
Mm.
you might want to look at ML engineers also in the mix, because they can build those anomaly detection algorithms for
Mm.
you, right? You need, like I already mentioned, a person who understands the data really well from the
Yeah.
business context side. Now you can use an AI there, right, where you can say that I'll build an agent who really understands my business well, to even decipher and say that the data that is flowing in every day, is it is it right or wrong. Like, take an example of, if my visit to my website every month for the last 5 years has been, like, let's say 1 million, just taking a random example, and all of a sudden it has gone down to like 100,000, then there's something wrong. You
Mm.
can build an ML algorithm around it, or an AI agent or whatever. That understanding is very critical. So
Mm.
that's where I think one other point which is critical is, in the entire data team landscape, you can't put a person who understands the probabilistic side of the world out of the mix,
Yeah.
because they have to make sure that the system becomes intelligent,
Mm.
to say the least, right? And to make the system intelligent, it's a different skill set altogether. So
Mm.
I remember that we were doing some data drift framework internally. We as data engineers sat and worked on it, experimented on it for three to four weeks, and then we went to our chief data scientist and spoke to him about this, and then he was able to solve in a week. And that's where the realization also dawned upon that there is a skill set that you can't replace, or you can't just sidetrack, right, from that. So in my mind, that is also very critical. The other aspect to your original question of, to run the team, what is needed, people who have built the system, they have to be present in the team in some capacity the other, apart from the documentation they have created. Because once the system goes live, the true test comes when the entire 1 year cycle is gone. Because take any customer, right, there are business, if you're talking about, again, B2C customer, right, they have cycle of data trends that they see, right? Sometimes the data spikes up in certain months, sometimes in some other month. Then so your true test happens in a one complete year. It's not just 1 quarter or 2 quarters. So those who have built, they have to be in the system, whether they're a data engineer playing a support role, managing the tickets and making sure things run smoothly, or otherwise. Then
Right.
of course on call job, etc., where people are there to manage your tickets and make sure that the lights are on. uh, I think these are critical roles. DevOps engineering, I feel, irrespective of whether you are keeping the lights on or you are running the system as is, DevOps engineers play a very critical role to
Yes.
remove a lot of those challenges. Like take an example of when you are even pushing a new piece of code. If you don't have security embedded into your DevOps pipeline, right, then it's a hindrance towards your overall success. I
Mm.
remember working for a company where they were so secured in the way they manage their entire infrastructure, that even when we were evaluating the tools within Azure platform or tools like Databricks, we had to go dig deep and understand every single movement of the data from their network to the, let's say, Databricks network or Azure network, right?
Oh.
So that level of detailing is also very critical. Again, it's not like to just run the system, but it is also to design the system. Just side tracking, but this is a very critical point which I learned from this particular implementation, where it became so important to understand how the data even moves out of your network.
Mm.
Because we talk about a lot of serverless systems are there in the market, right?
Yeah.
There is serverless technologies that are there. Do we really understand as practitioners that whether a data is leaving your system or your network or not?
Mm.
If you don't, a lot of the security professionals always take care of that. The big organizations, it always happen. I'm not talking about that. But when you're getting started with it, not understanding that and building a system around that will be fatal in the future, right? So like I said, there are so many variants. One
Yeah.
person definitely cannot play a role, but a
Yeah.
data architect, a solution architect, or an enterprise architect who has been focused on building these systems, they have to be in a journey where they have played multiple roles.
Right.
They would have played the role of a BI engineer in the past, a data warehouse engineer, an ETL engineer, or a developer, backend, front end developer. I mean, I feel there should not be a reluctance to play a role
Yeah.
if you want to, if, really grow in this space.
It's
That
it's
has been
like
my learning. Yeah.
it's like a you're building a product within a company. So it's a product, and you are the owner of the product. It's like you're an entrepreneur, and you need to figure out what's needed. So it's I am solving your data need for your domain,
Yeah.
and for that a product needs to be done. For that I need to hire a team, right? The team will have
Yeah.
people with different skill sets. Some will have domain depth, some will have technical depth, some will be
Yes.
the ones who just keep the lights on, right? Because the
Absolutely.
role of DevOps engineer is something, because I see there is a big uptick in the demand for people having DevOps skills. So
Yeah.
DevOps skills, and then the several, you say the subsets of, as you say, FinOps, you say DevSecOps, or whatever
Yeah.
ops you can add, AI ops, LLM ops, right? But
Absolutely.
yeah, in the end, because as things are getting complex, systems are getting complex, and of course the domain itself brings its own complications. For example, if you're building a data platform for a BFSI domain versus if you're building for retail CPG domain, I think they are like vastly
Very
different,
different.
right?
Very
So
different.
true,
Because the consumption personas are also very different,
very
and
much,
the security parlance of these systems are very different, right?
very much.
In fact, on the DevOps point, platform itself, like managing a platform team, or even supporting your internal or customers, however you want to see that lens at, from platform, is a highly complex job, because platform is not just about provisioning certain services using Terraform or creating some DevOps pipeline. There is so much variations, there is just so much nuances that you have to go through, not only from the security standpoint, but also in terms of the limitations of every service that you're provisioning, or every request that you get from any team within your company, right? So in my experience, also having worked with platform teams as well, it's a highly complex systems, highly complex job role. That's why I have a lot of respect for DevOps engineers in general as well, because again, DevOps, you can, like you said, DevOps, DevSecOps, AI Ops, LLM Ops, you can just bucketize into a platform team and say that platform teams, in my mind, is the one of the most complex jobs that you can have in your data team,
True.
because there's no room for going
Exactly.
wrong,
Yes, yes,
right?
and this
So
I think that this gives me a lot of insights that all these roles coming in and being gelled together by say a person having a domain depth and the architect. So this is how the team hierarchy gets created. But as we see today, with all the people around, there is one more entity which is now becoming your friend, or say your teammate, is AI. So with
yeah.
AI starting to mimic a lot of work, which earlier it was kind of forte of engineers, right? Like coding itself. So there's a saying that software engineers are quickly outdating themselves, programming themselves out of their jobs, right?
Mhm.
So with all these tools coming in, with your coding becoming faster, what are the areas or tasks in a data team you see is starting to get towards a lower value zone, and what are the tasks or the capabilities which you see is going to take a rise, or which is going to become more important? Do you see the data team shrinking, right? Do you see it's getting more verticalized? Like, how do you see the data team evolving in this new parlance of AI?
Yeah, I think still early stage to comment a lot on that, but I'll still take a shot and give my some perspective on that, right? I think the skill that is definitely on the rise is how well you understand your business, how well you understand the data itself, right? That I think is a non-replaceable skill. Even with AI coming in and the more intelligence, even if you give to AI, that is still a non-replaceable, because understanding your business is always value added than any other thing in the market, right? I've seen that over and over again in terms of how I've seen things evolve, right?
And people won't
So
depend
that
upon machines to do this. They would need humans to be there to be able
correct.
to understand, right?
Because yeah, business nuances are fed from not only how your systems are performing, it is also based on external factors, what you're seeing around, what
Mm.
strategy you are building internally. So I think keeping your ear open on multiple of these dimensions is critical, and maybe in the future AI might become that. But I think at this moment as we stand, understanding your data is a non-replaceable skill, at least at this moment, right? Because with that you can even build your AI agents to the perfection, right? Because
True.
then you can say that what you want to contextualize from which particular table in your entire universe of data you can contextualize and give this right. So you don't need a quality engine to build that system, right? So that's where
True.
I'm getting towards, that if you know that, you are definitely at the edge, right? Whether it is, you know, the data of a vertical, you know, the data of your entire horizontal within a company, does not matter, right? So I feel that is definitely a skill that needs to be there. Second skill, I think, which will always be in the demand is the optimization skill.
Mm.
So because look, everyone wants to save cost, everyone wants to run things faster, everyone wants to
Yes.
build the systems in the most optimized way possible. That's where anyone who understands the technology in and out to optimize it to a point. So I'll just compare it with a anecdote from Formula One. I'm a big Formula One fan. So a driver is given a machine, but that driver can extract maximum out of that machine, optimize with his or her skill set, right?
Right.
So taking an example of today, Japanese Grand Prix that happened. So I mean the qualifying that happened, Max Verstappen from Red Bull, he does not have the best machine that is there under hood,
Mm.
underneath rather, but he extracted the maximum out of it. He optimized his machine to the maximum along with his engineers to get the pole position by
Mm.
100th of a second, right? 100th of a second, right? So in my mind, I've always valued optimization as a skill over any other development skill. So we have team members where we have seen that that skill is non-replaceable. Optimization skill is non-replaceable. To save cost, to run it in the most faster way. Even if, let's say, any platform simplifies their operation, there is always a room to optimize it further, because
Mm.
someone or the other will build the system in not the robust or optimized manner.
Right.
So I think that is always on the rise, even with AI, because that nuance is something that you can't always get from a system easily, right?
Right.
Now I would not say declining skill, but I think skill that won't be a differentiator is knowing how to write a good SQL code per se,
Mm.
or writing only a good Python code per se. You have to marry it with how much framework mindset, process mindset,
Mm.
optimization mindset you get along with your domain mindset. So I think the differentiator is gone, at least for the data engineering or data teams, where they can say that I write the best SQL code and
Mm.
hence I'm the right person for this job. I feel that, in my opinion, will fade away a bit or will not be a differentiator. In certain cases, it will be.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
let's say you are processing terabytes of data every day, right? So then that would become a differentiated skill probably, but not every day. Like if you say as a as a young professional coming into the field and saying that I know how to write a data pipeline only, I think that's not a differentiator. That's where I think you have to teach your young professionals more and more skills along with building a data pipeline. Otherwise, it will not always move in the right direction that you are looking forward to, right? Yeah, I hope that I think these are the two questions that, I mean, the
Yeah. Yeah.
points
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
had, right?
So since I think we are sort of moving towards the end, last leg of our
Yeah,
conversation. So you talked about like helping your young team members skill up, right?
yeah.
So and curious, like my venture is into helping organizations upskill their talent base the best way, and how do you groom the top-notch data plus AI engineers? So now I'd come down to the point of capability development, because the more and more we see that we are knowledge workers, we are into knowledge economy. So knowledge has always been the driver, that has been the reason why I can command a role in your team. And okay, I know
Yeah.
this stuff, right?
Yeah.
But now you see that this knowledge getting commoditized, this knowledge getting codified with AI, right? With say you can talk to a bot and then you can get to do a lot of things, and the more experienced you are, the more x you get in terms of your productivity boost. Say if you're like a 3 4 years of experienced engineer, you have done things, you can get 10x boost very easily. And I can see that in my team, as my developers, my best of the developers, they get 20x 30x boost because they know how things are done. So
Yeah.
boilerplating they are able to do, right? But now in this case, how do you see capability development or the role of L&D? Because L&D also has been I see a huge disruption happening there, because the more I deal with L&D teams, the more I see that the more, I mean, I take a time to create a module, but that skill is already gone. So the skills are evolving faster, much faster
Yeah.
than the pace at which you could create maybe say a course, right?
Mm.
So, how do you see? Because you have been also been instrumental in driving L&D initiatives at Mathco. So, how do you see capability development coming up? How do you see learning systems evolving? What should we do so that you get the talent what works for you? So that's something which has always been on the corner of my head.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think my simple answer to this is twofolds, which I have seen from, like with Mathco that I've been involved with, in terms of driving that part, and also in terms of my overall learning experience. One is, I think, teaching foundational aspect is non-negotiable, right? You can't have a shortcut of not teaching foundational for a data engineer role or a DevOps or an MLOps or data scientist, any role, right? So any L&D team, first of all, I think L&D team is super critical. It is very relevant even now, because they bring in the structure that is needed within an organization to drive those initiatives. Otherwise, if you leave it in the hands of individuals or group, it will never be driven the way you want to drive it, right? And we coming from a very customer centric organization where we want to drive a lot of value for our customers. For us, being structured in our overall approach towards upskilling our team is super critical always from day one, right? So coming to my original point of two folds, right? One is on the foundational or fundamentals that you are teaching them, like whether it is starting with what an ETL is, how do you build an ideal data pipeline end to end, how do you look at what are the things you need to do in an ideal data pipeline. You need to make sure that the data is arranged in the right way, it is quality controlled, it is monitored, it is alerted. These are the foundational aspect of a traditional ETL, right? Then you move towards your Python, SQL, Spark, all of those skill sets, right? Then you move towards writing your giving them view of how you can develop a use case around a particular project, right? It gives them a project and they can view. So foundational is super critical all along in the training journey for a young budding engineer, data engineer, let's say in this case. uh, the I think that's one aspect that is very critical, right? The other aspect where I think a lot of the focus, apart from the foundational aspect of learning, the other aspect is just slipping my mind. I was just trying to recollect
No
the
problem. No
thought
problem. Go ahead.
again. So I think, apart from the foundational aspect, mm, I'm
Would
just
that be
recollecting
vertical
now.
thing? No problem, no worries. So, so when we look at, say, not the freshers. So, for example, for the freshers, if we see, okay, we should be giving them the foundational skills, the SQLs and the
Yeah,
Pythons and the understanding of the databases and the warehouses or whatever. But many times I find that, okay, we give them the foundational, but it's true that in the end, until unless you apply in a live customer setup, customer
yeah,
environment, you really don't get the connections between the
correct. Yeah,
between the dots, right?
correct.
So
So
this,
I'll come back.
yes,
Yeah,
go ahead.
sorry. I'll come back to that point that I was mentioning on the two folds, because of the so many thoughts going on in my head. I just lost track. So apart from that, I think the other aspect that you have to focus a lot towards is experiential learning, right?
Ah,
So what I mean by that is giving them a flavor of saying that this is your use case, this is the challenge, how do you solve? So think, making them think about the
yeah,
problem.
yeah,
So let's take a, you give them a case study, you say that okay, these are the 5 steps you have to execute. Anyone will go and execute in the
exactly,
AI world now
exactly.
that we are in. But telling them and planting those challenges and saying them to get to the most optimal thing, which is like a gray area. They don't know what that optimal thing
Yeah.
is or what that optimal point is. That experiential learning or that finding the problem kind of a learning is super critical. I
True.
feel that's where we also want to we also focus a lot there. That okay, you have understood the foundational aspect. How do you make sure that you understand what is not something that you know really well?
Mm.
Can you find those out?
Working
Can you
through the
build
unknown.
those ideal systems? Yeah, can you find needle in a haystack, right? So that kind
Very,
of a mindset
very
is
much.
very critical. And I think with AI that has become very critical. And I think when I spoke with you, I know we met like I think 2 years back during
Yeah,
the summit
yeah,
itself, right? So it's been two
yes,
years of our overall knowing each other as well. I think you also said that this is very core to how Encurious also goes forward in terms of their learning mindset, right?
true.
Foundational, of course, is very, core, which you can't replace. The other is that how do you make sure that you make them think?
Very much, very much. And I think the second point, you missed out the when you sort of forgot. This is the exact thing what we have been focusing a lot on, that how do you build systems, learning systems, where you, because we find people are too much constraint of time, right?
Yeah,
Learning, everybody likes learning, everybody loves, everything is good about learning, but the point is, where is the time, right? The engineer in your team is required to deliver to the customer. That's number one priority. And whenever is required, you have to get it done. But at the same time, you also need to ensure that you are not getting behind or lagging behind in terms of the skill sets. So how do I say respect your time and also get you these very situational,
yeah,
pinpointed environments? And that's something which kind of always challenged us, and when we started questioning that, how do we build these environments where, say, suppose I give you a challenge which for the next 2 hours, and you go to an environment where there's a pipeline which is already built and it is broken,
yeah,
right?
correct,
So the question is that, okay, it's broken, I don't know what's the problem, can you help me fix?
correct.
So this really does not give you, say, okay, as you said, like, okay, do this step one, step two, step three, right? Which I can ask an LLM to do and generate code for me. So that has not become relevant. But here is where you have to think in a multimodal way, right?
Correct.
Okay, whether it is a code problem, your debugging skills comes into picture. Where are you able to go through the logs? Where should I look for logs? What is the prompt I should be giving to ChatGPT to give me some response? Because
Yeah,
it's, and that's why I say, when you talked about context, when you talked about depth of whether it is technical or domain, it becomes important, because people say, hey, with these tools you are making people cheat. I said
yeah,
this, I don't think cheating is a good word to use anymore, because these are productivity enhancing tools in the
absolutely,
end,
absolutely.
right? And business will always reward things are being done faster and things are done right. So
Yeah,
if it's like the computer, the digitization boom, digitization which happened in banks in the late 1980s, it was the same thing. The clerks which were doing the manual registry work, they were no longer required, and the computers were bringing that, what do you say, unfair advantage in terms of productivity boost. It's the same thing happening here. So
yeah,
I think it's and getting this, when you want to ask the question, what's the person's contribution in this outcome? Because again, in the end, you will always ask, hey, what if it is completely AI generated? Why do I need this person then? Right?
mhm,
So it's okay if it is AI has generated it, but in the end, you are always going to hold the person accountable for the
yeah.
outcome,
So,
right?
so now it has become asking the right questions. I
Exactly.
think that has become very core to how we work and operate. So yeah, I think that sums up what you are also trying to, what you mentioned, that sure AI has done it, but have you asked the right question? And
True.
hence AI has done it, right?
Awesome.
So yeah,
Awesome, Varun. I think we overshot, but I think I enjoyed every single moment of our conversation. We could go on and on, and I always
absolutely.
love talking to you. Thanks a
Yes.
lot for your insights and coming on a Saturday to discuss.
No worries, Amit. Always pleasure talking to you as well, and looking forward to our conversations again.
Awesome.
See
Take
you.
care, Varun. Thanks a
Bye.
lot. See you. Bye
Bye.
bye.